You're not even dressed like someone this court should take seriously, the lawyer muttered loud enough for the gallery to hear. Leah tightened her grip on the mop handle beside her daughter's stroller. The court clerk gave a flat smile, barely glancing at the form she'd spent hours preparing. You'll need real counsel if you want to be heard. We'll wait, Leah said quietly. I'm used to being underestimated. It won't last. The man in the suit blinked, thrown by the softness of her voice. Behind her, Ava tapped her crayon against the sketchbook, unfazed. Subscribe now, before the court decides what you believe too late. Some stories don't come back once they're buried under assumptions. Leah Morgan was not shaking. She didn't plead. She didn't even explain. She looked exactly how they wanted her to. Quiet, broke, forgettable. But that was the safest mask she owned, and it had worked until now. Ava's cough had gotten worse last week. The prescription wasn't covered. The overtime hours weren't enough. So today, Leah came not as a janitor, but as a mother who had nothing left to lose. Where are you watching from? Because what happens next isn't rage. It's what happens when a courtroom forgets to fear the silence of a mother who's already buried her pride. Leah sat perfectly still on the metal bench outside Family Courtroom 3B. Ava's small fingers wrapped loosely around two broken crayons. The air reeked faintly of over-sanitized floors and cheap perfume. Lawyer's assistant, 2 seats down. The scuff on Leah's white sneakers hadn't faded with bleach, no matter how many times she tried. Across the room, Richard Calloway adjusted his Rolex and glanced at her like he was reviewing a maintenance request. "Do you even have representation?" he asked, voice theatrical for the benefit of the waiting parents and legal aides. Leah met his gaze, steady. "No." Richard turned to the clerk's desk. "Petitioner appears unprepared, unfit, and unrepresented. This is wasting the court's time." "She has a scheduled hearing," the clerk cut in, though without much concern. "Sit down, Mr. Calloway." The lawyer gave a performative sigh and took the seat closest to the judge's door. Leah remained on the bench. She'd learned long ago that the closer you sat to authority, the faster they burned you. Ava sneezed softly. Leah handed her the sketchbook without a word. Ava opened to a blank page and began to draw. The hallway felt like a pressure chamber. Heels clicking, children whispering, printers in the distance. Leah watched the door like a soldier awaiting orders. Not out of fear, but out of knowing. No one in this building would protect them. "Hey," a younger janitor mumbled, passing by with a mop bucket. "Didn't know you were on break." "I'm not." Leah didn't elaborate. She couldn't afford to. Not now. The truth about Leah Morgan didn't belong to this hallway anymore. Not to the scratched laminate floors or the fluorescent hum that made people's eyes twitch after an hour. No, the truth belonged to a courtroom 20 years ago, when her drawings had captured the face of a man who'd walked free, until her art proved otherwise. She had watched a federal judge cry once, but not for her. The bailiff stepped out and called her name. Leah stood, adjusted her backpack strap, and took Ava's hand. The sketchbook remained open in the child's lap, a half-finished drawing of the hallway around them. Inside the courtroom, the ceiling stretched high, like they wanted to make you feel smaller. Richard Calloway strutted to the center like it was his stage. He began speaking before the judge even looked up. "Your Honor, I'd like to open with a motion to—" Judge Reeves raised a hand. "Let's first allow the petitioner to speak." Leah stepped forward, slowly. "I'm here on behalf of my daughter, Ava Morgan. I filed for primary custody," Calloway chuckled. "Your Honor, this woman is a janitor. She has no legal education, no savings, no daycare plan. Her apartment—" Leah didn't flinch. Ava flipped the page. Judge Reeves looked tired. Not cruel, just tired, like she'd heard every version of this story and didn't expect anything new. The next 30 minutes blurred into objections, dismissive glances, and legal jargon flung like rocks. Leah barely spoke. Every time she opened her mouth, the lawyer interrupted. Every time she held her ground, the judge sighed. But behind them all, Ava kept drawing. And when the session ended, Ava quietly left her sketchbook on the corner of the courtroom bench. A bailiff walked by and paused, glancing down at the image. A courtroom, drawn in crayon, but with expressions so painfully human, so real, that it pulled him back. A single tear drawn under a woman's eye. A man yelling with red lines around his mouth. A judge looking small. The bailiff blinked, looked at the name written on the back, then looked up at Leah Morgan. And for the first time that day, someone didn't look through her. The courtroom emptied slowly, like air seeping from a balloon. Richard Calloway packed his monogrammed folder with practiced ease, his Rolex catching the dim light as if to remind everyone it was still worth more than their car. He didn't glance at Leah as he passed. She'd served her role. The obstacle he'd flattened. Leah didn't move. She sat at the edge of the bench, Ava's sketchbook still resting on the wood beside her. Forgotten by everyone except the bailiff who'd paused earlier. He was gone now. But Leah noticed the subtle shift. He hadn't thrown it in the lost and found pile. She took Ava's hand and stood. Ava looked up. "Did we win?" Leah smoothed her daughter's hair back behind one ear. "Not today." Ava blinked slowly. "But you didn't cry." Leah looked toward the judge's bench. "Crying doesn't fix things. Drawing might." The hallway outside felt colder now. Not the temperature, just the way people looked at her, or didn't. The custodian badge clipped to her belt had become her skin. Invisibility came with it, but so did clarity. People spoke freely around her, assuming she didn't matter. That made her dangerous. Richard Calloway was already across the hallway, laughing into his phone. "It's practically done. The judge isn't biting, and the mom? No threat. It's like arguing with a houseplant." He barked out another laugh. "Yeah. Custody should be ours by next week." Leah walked past him without slowing. He didn't even notice. Ava tugged her hand once they reached the elevator. "Mommy, why does he wear so much shiny stuff?" Leah pressed the button. "To make himself feel big. People like that are empty without it." The elevator dinged. They stepped in. Leah caught her reflection in the metal panel, smeared with fingerprints, just like the mop handle she'd left in the janitor's closet. The lines around her eyes hadn't been there when she first walked these halls. Back then, she'd had a clipboard and a paycheck for each sketch she delivered. She still remembered the way prosecutors whispered. Can she really capture emotion like that? She's the only one who can make jurors feel something. And then the headlines changed. Then her husband got sick. Then everything became about survival. By the time they reached the ground floor, Ava was humming a song Leah didn't recognize. It had no words, just the soft, tuneless comfort children sang when they needed something to hold on to. Leah didn't stop her. They exited into the lobby, where gold-plated plaques hung over marble tile. Leah's shoes squeaked faintly with each step. A security guard glanced her way, then looked back at his screen. At the far end of the lobby, a cluster of lawyers in suits argued over coffee orders. One of them, tall, lean, salt and pepper beard, looked vaguely familiar. Leah recognized the posture. He used to sit second chair in federal trials, 2 counties over. She looked away before he could catch her eye. But as she turned, a voice called out, "Hey, Leah." She paused. It was the younger janitor from earlier, Darren. He was maybe 25, perpetually chewing gum and wearing headphones. He stepped out of a supply closet, holding a mop like a rifle. "You okay?" he asked. Leah nodded. He glanced at Ava, then back at Leah. "Heard Calloway talking. Said you were just a janitor trying to fake your way through family court. That true?" Leah shrugged. "I'm not faking anything." He smirked. "Didn't think so. You move different." She raised an eyebrow. "I mean, like someone who used to stand in front of people. Be looked at. Like you were somebody else before all this." Leah met his gaze. "We're all somebody else before all this." He laughed, then lowered his voice. "My aunt says you used to be some kind of courtroom artist. Big deal back in the day. That true?" Leah said nothing. "Guess that's a yes," he muttered, half grinning. "Shouldn't be mopping floors, if you ask me." "No one asked," she replied gently. Darren shrugged and stepped aside. "Well, I think that sketchbook your kid left, somebody took it upstairs. Clerk's office, maybe. Saw him holding it like it was gold." Leah's body stilled. "Anyway, just thought you should know," he added, already walking away. Leah didn't move right away. Upstairs. That meant it hadn't been tossed aside. That meant someone looked. She and Ava crossed the atrium slowly, passing the directory board and the newsstand that hadn't changed its magazines in a month. The building suddenly felt more porous, less of a wall and more of a waiting mouth. Outside, the wind picked up. Leah knelt beside Ava and zipped her jacket. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're bringing new crayons." Ava tilted her head. "But we're not drawing tomorrow." Leah smiled faintly. "We are now." She didn't say it aloud, but something had shifted. The cracks in the system were small, but someone had looked through them, and next time they did, Leah intended to be ready. The next morning, Leah arrived earlier than usual. Ava clutched her hand, half asleep but content, her new pack of crayons held like treasure under one arm. The courthouse buzzed faintly with the low thrum of elevators and murmured legal debates leaking from conference rooms. Leah took the side entrance, not through the public security checkpoint, but through the staff corridor behind the janitorial supply room. Her badge still worked, at least for now. She didn't abuse it. But today wasn't about shortcuts. It was about watching. She needed to know who had her daughter's sketchbook. Ava sat beside her on the cold metal bench outside the clerk's office, swinging her feet while Leah pretended to skim the court calendar pinned to the wall. But her eyes flicked constantly to the glass window inside the clerk's office, where a tall man in rolled sleeves and a loosened tie leafed carefully through a small object. Square, colorful, unmistakably crayon-bound. The sketchbook. He wasn't looking at it casually. He was studying it, slowly, page by page. At one point, he looked up toward the ceiling, blinking hard. Then he closed the sketchbook and slipped it into a plain manila envelope. Leah stood. "Stay here," she told Ava, then walked inside the clerk's office with quiet intent. The man noticed her immediately, not because she made a sound, but because he was already looking for her. "Ms. Morgan?" he asked. She nodded, uncertain. "I'm Assistant Clerk Thomas Neri," he said. "Are you the mother of the child who drew these?" He held up the envelope, but didn't open it. "I am," Leah replied. "I need to ask, did your daughter witness that courtroom, seen from the gallery? Or did she imagine it?" "She was sitting next to me," Leah said. "She just draws what she sees." Thomas hesitated, then laid the envelope on the counter. "Has anyone ever taught her how to express emotion in shading, color gradients, facial architecture?" Leah felt something shift behind her ribs. "No," she said softly. "She just watches people, like I used to." He studied her face for a long moment. "I thought I recognized the style. There's a certain softness in the outline of the judge's hand. That's your technique." Leah's heart paused. "You've seen my work?" I interned with the Northern District 5 years ago. Your sketches were in the archives, especially the Reeves-Callan trial. My supervisor called you the eyes of the jury. She didn't speak. Thomas lowered his voice. Why didn't you tell the court who you were? Because I'm not her anymore, she said. That Leah could afford lawyers. He glanced at the sketchbook again, then handed it back to her. Not inside the envelope, but as it was, slightly frayed at the edges, the pages warm with use. Judge Reeves saw this, he said quietly. Didn't say much, but she asked me to log it. I didn't. Yet. Why not? He gave a tired smile. Because I didn't know if it was a piece of evidence or a message. Leah nodded. It's both. She turned and walked out without another word. Ava hopping down to join her. The courthouse felt different now. Not welcoming, but aware. She felt eyes on her that had once skimmed past her name like it was an afterthought. One bailiff nodded as she passed. A court reporter offered a small, almost embarrassed smile. Invisibility was cracking. Ava looked up. Did we get it back? Leah handed her the sketchbook. Ava flipped through the pages, stopping on the courtroom spread. Why did the man look sad when he held it? Because he saw something real, Leah said. And that scares people more than pretending. They waited another hour for their session to be called again. Leah had submitted additional documents that morning. Pay stubs, school records, character references. It wouldn't matter. Not really. Not against Calloway's war chest and Caleb's perfectly curated Father of the Year performance. But something had changed. Not in the paperwork, in the atmosphere. When they entered the courtroom again, Richard Calloway was already pacing like a man rehearsing a speech for a crowd that had grown less friendly overnight. Judge Reeves glanced at Leah only once, then at Ava. Her gaze lingered. The hearing began. Calloway launched into a monologue, repeating his points about Leah's income, lack of formal counsel, her job, her housing situation, all facts. But each time he finished a point, the judge didn't nod. She simply waited. Your Honor, he said finally, I move to disqualify the petitioner based on lack of sufficient legal basis and unstable parental resources. Reeves raised a hand. Before I respond, may I ask, is the child present in the room? Calloway blinked. Yes, but I'd like to speak with her. Privately. Leah's stomach flipped. Your Honor, she'll be safe, Reeves said. It will be short. Leah looked at Ava, who nodded. Not smiling, just calm, as if she already knew what she would say. The court officer led her into chambers. The silence left behind felt like gravity collapsing in on itself. Calloway shifted uncomfortably. Leah said nothing. Minutes passed. When the door opened again, Judge Reeves stepped out first, her expression unreadable. Ava followed, still holding her sketchbook. Court will reconvene in 10 minutes, Reeves said. I've received new information that requires review. Leah held her daughter's hand as they returned to the bench. She didn't know what Ava had said. But whatever it was enough to interrupt a judge. Leah didn't speak during the recess. She sat with Ava on the long wooden bench outside the courtroom, her fingers lightly tracing the fraying edge of the sketchbook now resting in her daughter's lap. Ava was unusually quiet, alert but serene, the kind of stillness that made Leah wonder what exactly had been said behind that chamber door. Ava glanced up at her. The judge had a picture on her wall? Leah nodded, prompting gently. What kind of picture? A drawing, Ava whispered. Black and white. Looked like the person was sad, but proud too. Leah's breath caught in her chest. She knew that drawing. She'd made it. It had been a sketch of Judge Eleanor Reeves herself, drawn during the final day of the Reeves-Callan corruption trial. A moment of quiet strength, just after sentencing. Leah had captured the slight droop of the judge's shoulders as she read out the verdict. And something in that sketch, its raw, unfiltered honesty, had resonated. The original had been gifted, but she hadn't known Reeves still had it. She said she remembered it, Ava continued, and she asked if you taught me how to draw feelings. Leah's throat tightened. What did you say? Ava tilted her head. I said, I watch you, and when you feel something, I draw it before you hide it. Leah looked away, blinking hard. The bailiff opened the door again, announcing that the judge was ready. Calloway returned from wherever he'd been muttering on the phone, clearly irritated. His eyes barely acknowledged Leah's presence now. He looked at her, the way someone looked at a puzzle with a missing piece. Inside the courtroom, Judge Reeves was already seated, her robe straightened, her demeanor unshaken, but softer. We will proceed, she said, folding her hands over the bench. No rulings yet, but I've reviewed additional context. Calloway stood. Your Honor, if I may clarify, the petitioner's recent attempt to supplement her case with a child's drawing. I didn't say that was the context, Reeves interrupted smoothly. Calloway paused. Reeves continued. Mr. Calloway, I've reviewed your client's statements, financial records, and documented visitations. The legal foundation of your argument is structurally sound, but lacking in emotional validity. He hesitated. With respect, Your Honor, this is family court, Mr. Calloway. If your case fails to reflect the emotional stability of the home environment, it lacks what this court exists to uphold. Leah sat motionless. The judge turned to her. Ms. Morgan, please approach. Leah rose slowly, walking forward with quiet resolve. Ava remained on the bench, feet swinging again. You've previously worked for this court system, have you not? Reeves asked. Yes, Your Honor. In what capacity? I was a contracted courtroom sketch artist. Freelance. Mostly for federal cases. Some state. Her voice was clear, but even. Calloway scoffed faintly, but said nothing. Reeves nodded. Did you stop by choice? No. My husband passed, and I needed to take whatever work would support Ava. Art doesn't come with health care. There was a beat of silence. Reeves broke it with a glance to the court reporter. Let the record show Ms. Morgan's professional background has bearing on the emotional context of this case. Calloway stepped forward, trying to recover control. Your Honor, may I remind the court that artistic ability has no bearing on custodial competence? It does, when it reveals truth, Reeves said sharply. He fell silent. Leah didn't look at him. She couldn't afford the luxury of pride. Not yet. Reeves shifted tone. I've reviewed the sketchbook. While it's not formal evidence, it provides a window into the emotional world of the child. Her drawings show a consistent theme of safety, presence, and comfort in her mother's care. Leah's knees nearly buckled. Furthermore, the judge continued, her depiction of her father's presence is noticeably absent or detached in every scene. Calloway attempted a neutral tone. Children exaggerate. Emotionally driven imagery is hardly. They also reflect what they lived through, Reeves said. She turned back to Leah. Do you believe your daughter's art tells the truth? Leah hesitated only a second. Yes, Your Honor. More than I ever could with words. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then, you may step back. Leah returned to her seat, heart thudding so loudly she feared Ava might hear it. Calloway shuffled papers with forced confidence. He didn't like losing control, especially not like this. Quietly, slowly, in full view of a courtroom where no one raised their voice. Just like Leah used to sketch trials. Subtle, but damning. Judge Reeves took a breath. I'll need one final session tomorrow. Until then, this hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down, not with a bang, but with something heavier, like a stone being placed on the scale between perception and truth. Leah gathered Ava into her arms. As they walked out, someone held the door open for her. It was Thomas Neri. No words, just a nod of acknowledgement. Leah didn't smile, didn't gloat. She didn't need to, because for the first time in years, she wasn't just seen, she was recognized. The next morning, the courthouse was quieter, not in sound. Doors still opened and shut with their familiar groan. Voices echoed across the polished marble, and someone argued loudly over filing fees 2 floors up. But something about the air felt different, less like a place people moved through, more like one that watched them. Leah noticed it the moment she walked in. A few staff members gave her a glance longer than usual. Not cruel, not pitying, just seeing. She didn't like it. For years, invisibility had been a shield. Now, every glance felt like a test. She'd stepped out from behind the mop bucket, even if no one said it outright. Ava, skipping slightly ahead of her, tugged the sketchbook from her backpack and hugged it to her chest. Her fingers were stained with red and blue crayon from the night before. "Don't forget," Ava said without turning around. "I made a new picture." Leah smiled faintly. "Of course you did." They reached the courtroom early. Calloway wasn't there yet. Only the bailiff, who gave Leah a quiet nod, and a woman with thick glasses organizing files at the bench. Leah sat in the same seat they always took. Back left, second row, close enough to hear, far enough to breathe. She watched the court reporter's fingers fly over the stenograph machine, just testing keys. It was all muscle memory, the same way Leah had once been able to look at a person's face and draw what they hadn't said. Ava was humming again, a new tune, lighter than before. She opened her sketchbook and began adding lines to a picture Leah hadn't seen yet. The door creaked open behind them. Leah glanced over her shoulder, expecting Calloway's purposeful stride. Instead, it was someone else. A woman in a dark green coat, her face vaguely familiar. She wasn't a lawyer, not exactly, but she walked like someone who belonged here. She paused by Leah's bench. "You're Leah Morgan?" she asked, voice low. "Yes." The woman extended a hand. "Diane Vestry. Family Services." Leah hesitated before shaking it. "I've been assigned to review Judge Reeves's preliminary concerns," Diane said. "Custody investigations usually take weeks, but she's filed for an expedited child welfare report." Leah stiffened. "Is that bad?" "Not necessarily," Diane replied. "It usually means she sees something that requires clarity, one way or the other. She doesn't like ambiguity." Leah glanced at Ava, still drawing, unaware of the grown-up storm around her. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Diane smiled gently. "Nothing yet. I'm just observing today. Quietly." Calloway swept in 10 minutes later, smelling like expensive cologne and irritation. His coat was over his arm, his shirt slightly rumpled. He didn't look at Leah this time. Judge Reeves entered soon after, robe rustling, expression unreadable. "We'll proceed," she said, already glancing at her notes. "This hearing is to continue evaluation of custody conditions and consider admissible testimony related to the child's emotional and environmental well-being." Calloway stood. "Your Honor, I object to the continued introduction of non-evidentiary material in this case. The sketchbook—" "I've reviewed your objection," Reeves interrupted, "and I've overruled it." He opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Reeves turned to Leah. "Ms. Morgan, did your daughter draw another picture last night?" Leah blinked. "She did. May I see it?" Leah nodded and gently coaxed the sketchbook from Ava. who handed it over without hesitation. Reeves opened to the page. Her fingers barely moved, but her eyes did. They flicked across every detail. Leah couldn't see the drawing, but she knew what it was. Ava had shown her just once before zipping it into her bag. It wasn't a courtroom this time. It was 2 apartments, side by side. One was filled with books, warm blankets, and a mother holding a child's hand. The other had sleek furniture, a television, and a father looking at his phone while the child sat alone in the corner. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. The judge turned the sketchbook around for a moment, letting Calloway see it. His face twitched. "This child's emotional awareness," Reeves said slowly, "speaks volumes. What's not in the picture is as telling as what is." Calloway tried to smile. "Children draw all sorts of things, Your Honor. We shouldn't romanticize stick figures." "They're not stick figures," Reeves replied. Then she looked at Diane. "Ms. Vestry, do you have preliminary observations?" Diane stood, calm and poised. "Yes, Your Honor. Based on previous interviews and Ava's displayed behavior, I believe the mother-child bond is secure and nurturing. The child exhibits trust, emotional expression, and safety in her mother's presence." Calloway crossed his arms but said nothing. Reeves nodded. "That aligns with what I've seen." Leah sat still, hands folded, not trusting her voice. Reeves returned the sketchbook. "I have one final question for today," she said. "Ms. Morgan, why haven't you told anyone in this courtroom, until now, about your former career?" Leah looked directly at her. "Because this isn't about who I used to be. It's about who I am when no one's looking." The judge let that hang in the air. Then, "Court is adjourned until tomorrow." The gavel struck again. As Leah stood to leave, Diane offered a small nod of approval. Not loud, not public, but deeply felt. And from the bench, the judge watched her go. Not with pity, with recognition. Leah barely slept. That night, she lay on the couch while Ava dozed in the bedroom, the soft rustling of blankets and the hum of the old refrigerator filling the quiet. Her eyes followed the ceiling fan's slow rotation, not spinning fast enough to distract her, just steady enough to remind her the hours were passing. She kept replaying the moment Judge Reeves turned the sketchbook around. The pause, the expression, the silence in the room that had held more weight than any shouted objection ever could. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was losing. She didn't feel like she was pretending to be a mother in front of people who thought motherhood required receipts. She felt seen. But recognition came with risk. The more people saw her, the more they would question why someone like her, once an artist trusted in courtrooms, now scrubbing them, had fallen so far, and whether that fall made her unfit to climb back. By morning, the weight had settled in her chest again. But Leah was used to carrying things that didn't belong to anyone else. She laced up her scuffed sneakers, packed Ava's sketchbook, and walked out the door. The bus ride was quiet. Ava sat by the window, tracing shapes on the foggy glass, humming that same soft tune from earlier in the week. Leah didn't ask what it was. When they stepped off at the courthouse, the air was sharper than usual. Maybe it was just her. They passed through security, down the hall, past the bronze plaques. But this time, something stopped her. Outside courtroom 3B, a small cluster of people stood talking. 2 clerks, 1 junior lawyer, and Diane Vestry. They weren't loud, but they weren't whispering either. Leah slowed her pace, just enough to catch the tone without seeming like she was listening. "Said the judge recognized her name from the old sketch archive," one clerk said. "Apparently, her stuff was used in the Callan trial." "No kidding," said the lawyer. "I thought that was all digital." "It was," Diane replied. But some artists see what cameras can't. Leah didn't interrupt. She kept walking, but Ava tugged her sleeve. Mom? Why did that lady say your name? Leah paused, then knelt to meet her daughter's eye. Because people are starting to remember. Is that good? I'm not sure yet. Inside the courtroom, it was just the three of them for now. Leah, Ava, and Diane, who nodded at them with her usual quiet professionalism. She was already reviewing paperwork, but her eyes occasionally flicked to Ava, who had begun a new drawing. This time, it wasn't a scene. It was a face. Judge Reeves, strong jaw, tired eyes, mouth pulled tight in thought. Ava had captured her from memory, almost exactly like Leah had, years ago, when she first sketched Reeves. During a federal hearing, Leah leaned over. That's very good, Ava smiled. I only messed up her hair a little. The doors opened behind them. Calloway walked in, adjusting his tie. This time, he didn't look at Leah. He looked at Ava, just for a second, and something in his expression faltered. It wasn't fear, not yet, but it was awareness, the kind that comes when control begins to slip. Judge Reeves entered minutes later. She carried no visible folder today, no stack of notes, just a small, square envelope and a single legal pad. Let's proceed. The hearing began with procedural recaps, quick confirmations of schedules and documentation. Calloway made a few more objections. Formal, predictable, lacking heat. Diane submitted her first official interim report. Calm, clinical, strong. Then Judge Reeves held up the envelope. Ms. Morgan, she said, do you know what this is? Leah shook her head. It's a letter, Reeves said, from a former federal prosecutor, recently retired. He submitted it voluntarily after hearing your name mentioned during a private conversation with Assistant Clerk Neri. Leah's stomach tightened. Reeves unfolded the letter slowly. I won't read the full contents into the record, she said, but the summary is simple. He recalls your courtroom sketches as being so emotionally precise that they often altered the tone of proceedings, reminding everyone in the room that human lives, not just legal arguments, were at stake. The courtroom was still. I mention this, Reeves continued, because I believe it reflects the kind of mother who raises a child capable of the emotional perception we've seen this week. Calloway shifted in his seat. Reeves looked at him now. Mr. Calloway, your client has provided a sound financial structure. However, he has failed to demonstrate any evidence of emotional connection, behavioral consistency, or meaningful engagement with the child. He opened his mouth, closed it. Reeves turned back to Leah. You've offered no grand speeches, no self-promotion, but your daughter's drawings have done what most witnesses can't. They've told the truth. Ava looked up, blinking. Reeves smiled softly. Thank you, Ava. You may not know it yet, but you've helped the court more than most adults ever could. The gavel didn't fall. Not yet, but everyone knew which direction it was leaning. And this time, Leah didn't just feel seen. She felt trusted. Leah didn't speak much that night. Ava fell asleep early, curled beside the sketchbook on their shared mattress, her fingers still marked faintly with charcoal smudges. Leah sat at the small kitchen table, watching the city lights flicker behind cracked blinds. She hadn't cooked, hadn't turned on the TV. Her thoughts felt too loud to compete with anything else. She should have felt victorious, or at least hopeful. But hope was dangerous when it came too soon. Recognition was. Not a ruling. A letter from a prosecutor was not custody. And people like Richard Calloway didn't go down quietly. He had too many clients in high places, too many favors owed. He'd let the judge speak her piece. Yes, but Leah had seen the twitch in his jaw, the tightening around his eyes. He was planning something. The next morning confirmed it. They were barely 2 steps into the courthouse when Diane Vestry met them at the security checkpoint. "Good morning," she said, her voice neutral. "Judge Reeves wants to see Ms. Morgan in chambers, privately. No lawyers present." Leah's gut nodded. "Why?" Diane hesitated. "Something's changed. She wants to speak with you before the hearing starts." Ava looked up. "Can I come?" Leah knelt beside her. "Stay with Ms. Vestry, okay? Just for a little while." Ava didn't argue. She held the sketchbook tightly, like it was a shield. Leah followed Diane through the side corridor, past the filing rooms and judges' conference lounges. Her footsteps echoed, the sound too loud for a building so full of silent verdicts. Inside chambers, Judge Reeves was standing beside her desk, not behind it. She wore reading glasses and no robe, just a slate-gray suit and an expression carved in stone. "Ms. Morgan," she said, gesturing toward the seat across from her. "I wanted to speak to you before things get complicated." Leah sat slowly. "Complicated how?" Reeves took off her glasses and folded them carefully. "Calloway filed an emergency motion this morning. Claims he has photographic evidence that you brought Ava into your custodial job after hours, into a building where chemicals and equipment were left unsecured." Leah blinked. "That never happened." "He also alleges that you used your badge to bypass courthouse policy, specifically the staff-only corridors, during your off hours. Claims it's proof of instability, poor boundaries." Leah stared at her hands. "This is retaliation," Reeves said, plainly. "But we have to respond to it as a formal motion." "I used my badge because the public elevators were closed that morning," Leah said quietly. "The guard told me to go through Staff Hall. I didn't bring Ava near anything dangerous. She sat on a bench drawing while I finished mopping one last floor." Reeves didn't look surprised. "I believe you." "Will the court?" Reeves paused. "We'll find out." She returned to her desk, slipped the glasses back on, and picked up a slim folder. "One more thing," she said without looking up. "Yesterday's drawing. The one Ava made of the 2 apartments." Leah nodded. "I showed it to the child psychologist assigned to our rotation," Reeves said. "He said it was the most emotionally coherent rendering he's seen from a child her age in 5 years. Leah said nothing. Reeves looked up. "Ms. Morgan, children don't lie in crayon." Leah met her gaze. "No, but adults lie with everything else." Reeves closed the folder. "Get ready. Calloway's going to come in swinging." Back in the courtroom, Diane had moved closer to Ava. They were sitting side by side now, Ava showing her a new drawing in progress. Diane was smiling, nodding slowly, as if each detail deserved attention. Leah sat down quietly beside them. Ava held up the sketch. It was of the judge's chambers, minus the judge. Just Leah, sitting across from the empty desk. Alone, upright, calm. Leah exhaled. The doors burst open. Richard Calloway entered with new fire in his step, a folder clutched in one hand, and a performative sigh already in his lungs. "Your Honor," he began the moment the judge took her seat, "I'd like to submit an emergency motion based on documented negligence." Reeves didn't flinch. "We've reviewed it." "Then you know the implications," he said. "Unauthorized access, endangerment of a minor. If nothing else, this demonstrates a lapse in judgment that undermines the petitioner's claim of stability." Leah didn't rise. She didn't need to. Reeves flipped a page. "Mr. Calloway, are you aware that the staff entrance is commonly used during elevator maintenance and was cleared by security that day?" He hesitated. "I was not." "Then I suggest you verify facts before implying misconduct," she said. Calloway stiffened. Reeves turned to Leah. "Do you have anything to add?" Leah looked at Ava, then back at the judge. "I did what I always do. I kept her close, where I could see her, where she could see me working. Silence. Then Diane stood. Your Honor, I'd like to make a professional observation. Go ahead. In all my time evaluating family cases, I've rarely seen a child so emotionally centered, so quietly expressive, and so grounded in her understanding of adult behavior. That kind of security comes from consistent love. Not money, not prestige, stability of presence. Reeves made a note, then looked at Calloway. Anything further? He shook his head. Good. We reconvene tomorrow. The final ruling will be delivered. She rose. No gavel, just a quiet dismissal. But as Leah stood and gathered Ava's things, she knew what she'd seen in Calloway's face. He'd lost the room, and for the first time, he knew it. The courthouse looked smaller that day. Not physically, but in the way a storm feels smaller once it's passed through you instead of looming ahead. Leah walked the same marble halls she had every day for weeks, but now her steps felt deliberate. Ava walked beside her, swinging the sketchbook like a purse, a tiny hum trailing behind her like a ribbon of calm. It was the last day. Today, Judge Reeves would deliver her ruling. Leah had spent the night combing through her documents one last time. Medical notes, rent receipts, school attendance reports. She hadn't added anything new, just made sure nothing had been left out. But somewhere in the middle of the night, she'd stopped. Ava had crawled into bed beside her, clutched her arm like she used to when she was smaller. You already told the truth, Ava mumbled sleepily. They just have to see it. And Leah had realized no amount of paperwork could do what Ava had already done with 6 crayons and a sketchbook. They took their seats at the same bench in courtroom 3B. Diane Vestry was already inside, standing near the corner, notepad tucked under her arm. Her expression was unreadable, but when her eyes met Leah's, there was no worry in them. Richard Calloway entered 3 minutes later. He didn't rush, but he didn't look as composed as usual either. He had a second assistant with him now, someone too young to be helpful, just there for show. Leah didn't acknowledge him. The bailiff stepped out and announced the session. Everyone stood as Judge Reeves entered. She wore the robe again. The formality returned with it. This court is now in session. Everyone sat. Reeves didn't immediately look at the lawyers. She looked at Ava. Good morning, Ava. Ava blinked. Hi. You have your sketchbook again? Ava held it up. Reeves smiled faintly, then looked at Leah. Before I deliver my ruling, I want to acknowledge something that has rarely happened in my courtroom. A child, not through testimony or manipulation, but through natural observation and artistic truth, has shaped how we view this case. She paused. It was never about drawings. It was about attention. Ava's art reflected patterns, emotional availability, safety, consistency. And those patterns aligned with everything this court looks for in a primary caregiver. Leah felt Ava's hand tighten around hers. Reeves turned to Calloway. Mr. Calloway, your client's financial situation, while impressive, does not compensate for his absence in his daughter's emotional life. The psychological report corroborated what the drawings first hinted at: detachment, inconsistency, and a tendency to control rather than nurture. Calloway didn't interrupt. His hands were clasped too tightly for that now. The petitioner, Leah Morgan, has demonstrated not only responsibility and stability, but a remarkable emotional foundation that has allowed her daughter to flourish despite limited resources and ongoing personal sacrifice. Leah stared ahead, jaw steady, heart pounding. Reeves continued. Therefore, this court awards full physical and legal custody to Ms. Morgan. Visitation rights for the father will be conditional and supervised until reviewed at a later date. A hush fell over the room. Leah didn't move. Reeves's voice softened. Ms. Morgan, I know this system has not always been kind to you, but you have shown this court what it means to parent with dignity, without performance, without privilege, just presence. Leah exhaled slowly. Ava leaned against her side. Did we win? Leah nodded, blinking fast. We did! The courtroom slowly began to empty. Calloway gathered his things without making eye contact. He didn't speak to Leah. He didn't look at Ava. The assistant trailed after him, silent and useless. Diane approached Leah as she stood. Well done, she said. Leah gave a faint smile. You didn't need to speak yesterday, but you did. You didn't need to draw, Diane replied. But your daughter did. She handed Leah a folded document. The official record. You'll get the full paperwork in the mail, but this is the interim copy. Leah tucked it into her bag. As they walked out of the courtroom, Ava stopped short at the threshold. She turned, looked back at the bench, and flipped open her sketchbook. What are you doing? Leah asked. Ava bit her lip. One more. She sat on the floor, cross-legged, and drew quickly. A few lines. A long rectangle. Figures. Then she stood, tore the page out, and walked it back into the courtroom. The judge was gone, but the court clerk was still there, gathering files. Ava handed her the drawing. For the judge, she said. The clerk took it, surprised. Looked at the page. It was the courtroom again. But this time, Ava had drawn Leah in the center, not behind a desk or on a bench. Just standing, arms at her side, with Ava's small hand in hers. The caption in messy crayon beneath it read, She showed up. Leah watched as the clerk nodded, folded the paper, and placed it on the judge's desk. No signatures, no speech, just truth. And this time, they left the courtroom not as an inconvenience or a cautionary tale, but as a mother and daughter whose story had been heard. Leah didn't go home right away. After the ruling, she and Ava stood in the main lobby of the courthouse, surrounded by a swirl of people who had no idea what had just happened in courtroom 3B. Lawyers rushed past, heels echoed off marble, and security guards checked IDs at the door with the same blank stares they'd had all week. But everything had changed. Ava tugged on Leah's sleeve. Can we go to the bench? Leah looked down at her. The one in the lobby? Ava nodded. They walked to it slowly, Ava skipping once or twice before stopping to climb up. It was the same bench they'd sat on their first day, the one near the vending machine, half hidden from view. The wood was scratched and uneven, the metal legs slightly crooked, but Ava had loved it from the beginning. Leah sat beside her, letting the weight in her chest settle. Not the heavy kind this time. Not dread, just stillness. You were brave, Leah said quietly. Ava shrugged. I was just drawing. That's what brave looks like sometimes. Ava rested her head against her mother's arm. Across the lobby, Thomas Neri appeared at the clerk's desk. He was sorting files, but when he noticed them sitting there, he hesitated, then walked over. You're not in a hurry to leave, he said. Leah looked up. I think I forgot how to move without preparing for battle. Thomas smiled. It was something to watch, that hearing. I didn't say much. You didn't have to. He reached into his folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. Judge Reeves wanted you to have this. She didn't want to make a show of it. Leah took it cautiously. She said it belonged to someone who never got to thank you. He added, then gave a nod and stepped away. Leah opened it slowly. Inside was a folded piece of heavy paper, the kind used for courtroom sketches. But this one wasn't hers. It was from years ago, a recreation of the moment she had drawn during the Reeves-Callan trial. The judge sitting at the bench, one hand gripping the gavel, the other pressed to her mouth, a moment of visible weight. and beneath it, written in careful cursive, "You saw me before I saw myself." Leah stared at it for a long time. Ava peered over her arm. "That's the judge?" Leah nodded. "She looks sad," Ava said. She was, but not anymore. They sat for a while longer before finally leaving the courthouse. The sun was high now, bright and clear. No wind, just the clean, sharp warmth of late morning. They walked to the bus stop without talking. Leah didn't feel the need to explain anything. The hardest things had already been said, even if only in crayon. Back home, Leah hung up her keys and unzipped Ava's backpack to take out the sketchbook. Pages curled where they'd been folded. Crayon dust clung to the edges. She turned to the final page Ava had worked on the night before the ruling. It wasn't a drawing of court. It was their apartment. She'd drawn the kitchen with the chipped tiles, the lopsided table with 2 chairs, and the window that barely closed all the way. But it wasn't sad. There was light pouring in through the window. A cat curled up on the floor, though they didn't own one, and a woman at the stove stirring something in a pot. Ava had drawn them happy. Leah blinked fast, then set the sketchbook down and moved to the kitchen. She filled a pot with water, real stove. As it heated, she took out 2 bowls and a half-empty bag of noodles. Nothing fancy, but warm, steady. Ava came in and sat on the floor like the drawing. "Do you want to keep drawing?" Leah asked, not turning around. Ava thought about it. "No, I want to watch." Leah nodded. "Okay." They ate together in silence, the kind that didn't feel empty. Leah couldn't remember the last time food had tasted like it wasn't just survival. After the dishes were done, Leah sat at the table with her own sketch pad, one she hadn't touched in months, maybe longer. She opened to a blank page. She didn't draw the courtroom. She didn't draw Reeves or Calloway or anything that had happened this week. She drew Ava, not from memory, not from photos, just from where she sat now, on the floor, in sunlight, humming a tune that had no name. She let the pencil find the lines. Her hand moved without fear. And in that quiet moment, Leah Morgan began to return to herself. Not as the woman they remembered, but as the mother her daughter had never doubted she was. Rain tapped gently against the apartment windows the next morning. Soft enough not to wake Ava. Steady enough to remind Leah that the world had kept moving. She sat at the table, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, sketchpad still open from the night before. The page she'd drawn of Ava was only half shaded, the lines clean but incomplete. Not because she couldn't finish, because she didn't need to. Ava had already filled in the rest, with crayons, with truth, with silence that had spoken louder than Leah ever dared. The phone buzzed once on the counter. Unknown number. Leah let it ring. She wasn't afraid of bad news anymore. Not because bad news wouldn't come, but because she knew who she was when it did. By the time they arrived at the courthouse that day, the storm had passed. The sky was dull, but dry. The building looked the same as it always had, imposing, indifferent. But inside, it felt different. Not because of the verdict, not because of the drawing Ava had left behind, or the sketch from Reeves tucked into Leah's coat pocket, but because of how people looked at her now. Not through her, not past her, at her. She passed the main security gate. One of the guards, older, soft-spoken, nodded. "Morning, Ms. Morgan." It startled her. He'd never said her name before. Diane was already waiting outside the courtroom. Her hair was tied back, her coat folded neatly over one arm. When she saw Leah, she gave a smile. Not professional this time. Personal. "You holding up?" "Ask me after," Leah said. Diane nodded. "Fair." They walked in together. Ava clutched Leah's hand, sketchbook pressed flat against her side. Judge Reeves was already seated when they entered. She didn't speak for a moment. She just scanned the courtroom, the empty gallery, the attorneys, Diane, then finally, Leah. Let's begin. Calloway was quiet today. No theatrics, no bravado. He rose when prompted and accepted the ruling without objection. Maybe he knew when the current had turned. Maybe someone had told him to stop bleeding money into a case he couldn't win. Reeves didn't linger. The ruling stands. Custody is granted to Ms. Leah Morgan. Supervised visitation for the father, effective upon court-scheduled review. She looked directly at Leah. You've shown this court more than resilience. You've shown clarity. You've shown restraint. And you've shown how truth doesn't always arrive in statements. It arrives in how we live. And who notices? Leah didn't reply. She just nodded, one hand on Ava's shoulder. The gavel came down. This time. Final. No aftershock. No second motion. Just the sound of closure. As the court began to empty, Calloway paused near Leah. Not out of arrogance this time. Not even disdain. He looked at her, gaze unreadable, and said nothing. Leah didn't flinch, but Ava tugged on her coat and whispered, "Is he still mad?" Leah crouched. "He might be, but that's not our problem anymore." Ava nodded, solemn, then leaned in and whispered, "Can we show Diane the new drawing?" Leah smiled. "I think she'd like that." Outside the courtroom, they gathered near the same hallway bench they'd used so many times before. Ava pulled open the sketchbook and turned to the latest page. It was the courthouse again, but different this time. Not the courtroom, the lobby, the bench, and three figures sitting together. A mother, a daughter, and a woman with glasses. Diane. Diane leaned in, genuinely surprised. "That's me? You're helping us?" Ava said simply. "So I put you next to us." Diane blinked, then laughed. "Well, I'm honored." The drawing had one more detail. In the background, almost invisible, was a figure behind the security desk, nodding gently. Another by the doors, holding them open. A man in a shirt and tie at the clerk's window, watching with a small smile. They weren't the focus, but they were there. Witnesses. Leah looked up as Judge Reeves passed by, flanked by two aides. She didn't stop, but she slowed. Just enough. Ava stood instinctively and held up the drawing. Reeves glanced at it, then at Ava, then at Leah, and gave the smallest, rarest smile Leah had ever seen in a judge. Not formal, not polite, grateful. Then she was gone. Outside, the city had softened. The clouds were breaking, just barely. They stepped through the double doors and into the light. No cameras, no crowds. Just the sound of a crayon box rattling inside a backpack and the gentle pat of Ava's shoes on the pavement. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because for the first time in a long time, Leah Morgan was walking into the world not as someone dismissed, but as someone remembered. Leah stood in the doorway of the courthouse lobby for a long time. She wasn't waiting for anyone. There was no hearing left, no motion to respond to, no security guard waving her through like she was just part of the background again. The building that had once felt like a battlefield now stood behind her like a mountain finally climbed. But still, she lingered. It was Ava who broke the spell. "Mom," she said, tugging at Leah's coat. "Can we go show the bench to someone?" Leah looked down, puzzled. "The bench?" Ava nodded solemnly. "The one where we waited. Before everything." Leah understood. She turned, took Ava's hand, and they walked across the marble floor toward that old wood and metal bench tucked near the vending machines. It was empty, forgotten, like always. Leah brushed her hand over its surface. The scratches, the grooves, the quiet wear of 100 families, lawyers, staff, and strangers who had sat there, wondering what the next hour would do to their lives. Ava, climbed up and pulled her sketchbook onto her knees. She opened to a fresh page and began to draw the bench. Not just the object, but the moment. Leah sat beside her, watching. She thought about the first day she'd brought Ava into this building. Not as a visitor, but as a petitioner. A woman asking, begging, for someone to hear her. She hadn't known if the court would see a mother or just a mop handle. Ava had drawn the difference. Across the lobby, the bailiff from that first hearing walked past. He paused, gave a small nod. "Glad you're still here?" Leah tilted her head. "You remember us?" He smiled. Hard to forget someone who taught a courtroom how to look again. He disappeared through the security gate without another word. Ava leaned against her shoulder, sketching faster now, her brow furrowed in concentration. Leah watched her daughter's hand move, quick, light strokes that seemed to pull the world into place. Then she heard the voice she didn't expect. "Excuse me," came from behind them. Leah turned. A woman in a gray pencil skirt and navy blouse stood with a boy in tow. The boy looked about Ava's age, his shirt rumpled and collar askew. He held a thick folder against his chest like a shield. "I don't mean to intrude," the woman said. "But, were you the one from Courtroom 3B? The sketchbook? That little girl who drew the judge?" Leah glanced at Ava, who was still drawing, unbothered. "Yes," she answered. The woman smiled, but her eyes were tired. "We just had our first custody hearing. His dad didn't show up. Judge didn't say much, just postponed everything." She looked down, embarrassed. "But the clerk said your daughter left something behind, that it made a difference. So when I saw you here, I thought maybe—" She stopped herself. "I guess I just wanted to say thank you." Leah offered a seat. The woman sat. The boy sat too, cautiously, eyeing Ava's sketchbook. Ava didn't speak. She simply turned the book toward him and let him see the page she was working on. He blinked. "You made that?" Ava nodded. "You can too." The boy hesitated, then pulled a stub of a pencil from his pocket and an envelope from his folder. He turned it over and began to draw. 2 kids, 1 bench, 2 pages filling with soft lines and imagined light. Leah and the woman sat in silence, watching. "I didn't think anyone would talk to me here," the woman whispered. "I didn't think anyone would listen to me here," Leah replied. They both exhaled. Leah stood after a while and let Ava finish her drawing. She looked back at the bench once more before they turned to leave, as if sealing it into memory. Outside, the sky had turned fully blue. Ava twirled once on the sidewalk, laughing as her coat flared like wings. "Can we get cocoa?" she asked. Leah smiled. "I think we can do that." As they walked toward the cafe around the corner, something caught Leah's eye through the glass of the courthouse window. On the judge's bulletin board, normally filled with notices and schedules, there was a drawing pinned to the center. It was Ava's, the one with the bench. No signature, no label. Just 3 simple words scribbled across the bottom in a child's hand. She showed up. Leah blinked. The courthouse hadn't just seen her. Now, it remembered her. And tomorrow, when some other mother sat on that same bench, fingers trembling, heart in her throat, maybe she'd see it too. And maybe she'd remember what mattered most wasn't being perfect or prepared or powerful. It was showing up. 2 weeks later, Leah stood in front of the community center, the air thick with late afternoon warmth and the scent of cut grass drifting from the park nearby. Children laughed somewhere behind her, a jumble of voices and running feet. But Leah wasn't listening to them. She was watching Ava. Inside the main room, Ava sat at a folding table covered in colored pencils, sketch pads, and stray smears of pastel. She wasn't alone. 6 other kids surrounded her, each with their heads bent over their own paper. Some were quiet, some were chattering to themselves, but all of them were drawing. Leah had been coming here every Saturday now. At first, just to let Ava join the free art program. But then the coordinator, a woman named Rena, had asked if Leah would consider teaching a few sessions. Just basic things. Emotion in sketching, expression, telling the truth through color. Leah had hesitated. Teaching again felt dangerous, like claiming a version of herself that was still repairing. But Ava had looked up at her with calm certainty and said, "You always see what's real. Maybe you should show people how." So she had. Now every Saturday, Leah brought a box of her old sketch supplies, some worn, some untouched for years, and sat with kids who didn't care what her resume once looked like. They only cared that she could show them how to draw tears without drawing water, or fear without drawing faces. From the doorway, Rena appeared, holding a paper cup. "Still pretending you're just visiting?" Leah smiled. "Habit. You've got a wait list, you know. People are asking when the next session is." Leah raised an eyebrow. "A wait list?" Rena nodded. Word spreads fast when someone actually listens to these kids. Some of them don't have words for what they feel, but they're starting to draw things that even their teachers can't explain. She nodded toward the far wall, where the children's latest drawings were clipped to a string with wooden clothespins. At the center was Ava's. It showed a courtroom, but not like before. This one was empty. No people, no judge, no shouting. Just benches and light. The tall windows spilled sunlight across the floor, and on the farthest bench sat a sketchbook. Closed, resting. No caption, no name. Just a room at peace. Leah stared at it for a moment, then looked down at her hands. The same hands that had once trembled while holding mop handles now held pencils again. Not to escape, but to teach. To return. When the session ended, Ava ran up with smudges on her cheeks and a grin too wide for her face. "Can we show Diane the new one?" she asked, holding up her sketchbook. Leah knelt. "We will. I'll send it to her tonight." Ava leaned in. "She'll probably cry again." "She probably will." They gathered their things slowly. Leah packed the supplies into the worn leather satchel she'd used during her old courtroom work. She hadn't brought it out in years. Now it was just part of the routine. Outside, the sun was dipping low, gold and warm. They walked home the long way, past the courthouse. Ava always asked to stop for a second. Today was no different. They paused at the outer plaza, where a low bench stood beneath the old tree that leaned slightly west. Ava hopped up and swung her legs while Leah stood, hands in her coat pockets. "You think anyone sat there today?" Ava asked. "I hope so. Maybe someone's scared. Maybe someone's strong and just doesn't know it yet." Ava pulled out her sketchbook and looked at a new page. "Do you want me to draw them?" Leah smiled. "Not yet. Let them finish their story first." They stayed there for a while, just long enough to let the light stretch over the sidewalk and disappear into the curve of the street. Then they walked home, where the kettle waited, and the windows glowed soft yellow with comfort, not necessity. Leah unlocked the door, turned on the lamp, and slipped the day's sketches onto the table. She looked at Ava, who was already unpacking crayons and asking what tomorrow's drawing should be. And Leah realized this was what the judge had seen. Not just a mother who showed up for court, but a woman who had quietly turned survival into sanctuary. A mother who had turned pain into art, and art into something a child could trust. A bench, a sketchbook, a name spoken with respect. It had been enough. It would always be enough. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. They blocked the single mom's daughter from the party until the guest of honor called her name. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?